Hey guys, we are so excited to be with y'all today. I'm Tori, and today I am joined with Josh Spurlock. Josh is a clinically certified counselor and a sex therapist. You have a series of articles on the website, multiple series, but you have one specifically that I think speaks directly to me as a woman and speaks to a lot of women called Better Sex for Women. And it's a whole series of articles where you talk through how to experience sex as women with your spouse in a healthy, the way that God designed it, you know? And I love that series of articles. And I really want to touch specifically on one, which is she wants emotional connection before sex. I think any woman who's watching this right now hears me say that and sees themselves in that. Is like, oh yeah.
Yes, that's a fact.
Yes. And it's such a great article, Josh. And I really want to just, talk through it with you, kind of hear your thoughts and get your insight on some of these things. You talk through some of the reasons that emotional connection might be lacking. So I'd love it if we could just start by talking about that, Josh. What are some of those reasons?
Well, I want to first say that the reason why this series is written out like it is and is really focused on better sex for women is really, I think, female sexuality is under such incredible attack. We talked about
Yes.
how in a general way that sexuality in general is under attack, but man, female sexuality is really under attack within our culture and society.
Right.
So
I even think of, in the church. I think of growing up in that, and of course purity is important, but I think of growing up in that quote unquote purity culture of, this shame and this, it's your fault. You have to carry the burden of what men think of you, what you do, what you're, you know what I mean? And I think it's somewhere that I believe that the church has failed in a lot of ways in teaching young girls how to, see sex in the way that God designed it.
Totally. Couldn't agree more. Definitely true. See that as a counselor and as a sex therapist all the time, kind of the impact that kind of culture and the attitude within the church, how that has hurt women, hurt young gals, especially as they get into marriage and are disillusioned by kind of the things that they had thought would be their experience based on what they were told and just it not being that way. So totally. Whether it be from kind of church cultures context or just kind of male mentalities kind of around sexuality, right? That there can be attitudes and mindsets that men can have that we've picked up from culture, that we've picked up passed down generation to generation, that just view female sexuality in a distorted way and really causes males to be antagonistic towards female sexuality, to not understand and not appreciate the differences between men and women, can paint a picture for women that they're supposed to be like men and how they experience their sexuality, which can create all sorts of confusion and frustration and feelings of rejection and inadequacy for women. So there's just a lot.
Right, absolutely. And I gotta say, Josh, I really respect you for writing this series and taking the time to really intentionally look at female sexuality and the way that women respond. Because I think that, like we said, I think it's something that is lacking. And I think it's even more lacking when it comes to male authors and men really taking the time to understand and write these things, for the purpose, not just of, speaking to women, but also speaking to their husbands, like, what does my wife need,
Totally. And I think that's a really important piece, that as much as these articles are written to women, kind of understanding your own sexuality in a way that helps you own that and be able to enjoy that to its fullest as God's designed for you to. It's as much for educating men as well and helping them be able to understand the women in their life and understand their wives in a way that helps them provide a nurturing and healthy context for their female sexuality to bloom in and to really be and enjoy that fullness that God has designed for them. Because men play a big role in that, and creating that space. Sex is a very relational thing. It's not something that a woman can just bloom in, without it being a relational thing with their spouse.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think this article is a good place to start, of
Yeah.
that emotional connection that is just vital to healthy, safe sex for
Mm-hmm.
women, emotionally safe sex,
Totally.
I just think that it's so important. And I would love if we could start just by talking through the reasons why that emotional connection can
Mm-hmm.
be lacking. I think in marriage, and I mean, I've experienced this in my own marriage. Sometimes it's like you get married and these, rose-colored glasses,
Mm-hmm.
everything's going to be fine. Our emotional connection is never going to fade. These vows
Right.
that we sang on our wedding day are going to be something that we're constantly holding to, and everything's always
Easy
good.
and easy.
Yeah, easy, easy. But why does that happen? Why can that emotional connection just sort of shift and change with seasons and different
Yeah.
things? I'd love if you could just touch on that as, a therapist.
Yeah, I want to talk to it as a sex therapist, talk to it as a man, and as an expert on the subject matter, but not as someone who's perfect on the subject matter. Like sometimes we can listen to a podcast, or watch a video, or read a book, and the authors can kind of seem like they're on a pedestal of sorts, that somehow they've got it all figured out and kind of do this perfectly, and that's why they're writing on the subject matter. And that's just not reality. That's not true. The authors of scriptures weren't perfect people, and that they were flawed individuals that God used in order to communicate his truth to the body at large. Authors throughout the centuries and leaders within the church are all flawed individuals. I'm a flawed individual, and I'm not the perfect husband by any means. I don't navigate all these things perfectly. Much of what is written and talked about is from pain of my own experience and struggles that Cassie and I have had, and things that I've had to learn and unlearn from my experiences and growing up and in culture and whatnot. And so if you're a man out there and you're watching this, or if you're a woman out there, right? If you're a woman out there thinking there are these men out there somewhere that have this all figured out, and you just happen to marry one that's kind of not got it all figured out, listen, this is not true. We're all out there kind of struggling, trying to figure this stuff out. And if you're a husband out there and you're like, what, I'm so far from like hitting this, or I feel so lost in how to navigate it, it's pretty hopeless for me. And so there's no even point in even trying to understand my wife and her experience, because it's like a totally different language than I know. Listen, we're all in that same boat. We're all having to learn. None of us come from the womb of being like Don Juan and knowing how to navigate these things well. Some of us have the advantage of having maybe dads in our life that did a better job than others of modeling some of these healthy things, and some they have a leg up in internalizing some of that. But most of us, like myself, didn't have that, and really have had to struggle and work hard and continue to have to overcome my own selfishness and shortcomings and brokenness in order to show up well in my relationship and marriage. So just want to put that out there so that
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can.
we're never going to have it all together. We're never going to. I mean, we're going to try and we're going to pursue each other in the best way that we can, but we're always being sanctified. We're always growing. We're always learning. I remember I've had conversations with grandparents, and talking with them about their marriage and things that they've learned and things that they're still learning.
Yeah, totally. So let's talk about the bait and switch, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times guys especially can have this sense of a bait and switch kind of deal, right? And they're like, oh, it seemed like my wife, when we were dating, was interested in being physically close, was turned on, was excited about connecting, kind of maybe every time we were around each other, right? That had that sense of we had to really work to keep our hands off of each other. kind of piece, right? That kind of tension that was there. And we just couldn't wait to be married and be naked and rolling around to each other. And so I maybe had this vision in my mind that married life was going to be like all the sex I could possibly want to engage all the time, and it was going to be easy because it just seemed to be an ever-present sort of thing on both of our minds whenever we were together before we got married, right?
Right. I remember thinking that when my husband and I were just dating, there was just
Totally.
this constant struggle, this constant
Mhm.
excitement, and then it was like all of a sudden it was like, oh, I don't feel like I need to be touching you 24/7.
Yeah, right. Total like, this is different.
Almost this
Which
confusion, like, wait, I didn't think that this was going to be like this.
Yeah, what happened to me? And husbands can be like, what happened to you? Like, this is different than what was expected. So that's, man, such a common, normal, universal kind of experience. And when I say universal, that doesn't mean that there aren't exceptions to the rule. There's certainly couples that have a different experience around that, either before they get married or after. And we work with that all the time. So when I say universal, we're talking 80% of the time, right? So it still leaves like 20% of the time that people experience is different, which means 20 couples out of 100, their experience is different than that. That's a lot of couples
Yeah.
out there. And so if you fall into that 20% out of 100, that some of the what I'm talking about was like, that wasn't our experience. Listen, there's lots of people that have had your same experience, and we can navigate that as well. But we're talking right now about those that are kind of in that 80% out of 100, and that's a really common disillusionment for you to have when you get married. And it has to do a lot with the way our bodies change chemically. Right? All this is neurobiology, right? God wired us in such fantastic and intricate and complex ways. But when you and your husband were dating, right, and you guys were engaged, the primary hormones that played a role in the sexual tension that you guys felt, kind of that longing for each other, wanting to be together, looking forward to being together, was a dopamine and adrenaline, right? So adrenaline and dopamine are kind of what get us like really excited about kind of new things, right? We get jazzed about something to come, and in the newness and new relationships, dopamine and adrenaline really supercharge the sexual tension hormones that we experience in our body. It's like nitrous oxide, gasoline thrown on a fire, right? It really intensifies that experience. When we get married and relationships normalize, right? So we kind of settle down to a relationship, the hormones that drive kind of sexual relationship shift from dopamine and adrenaline to oxytocin. So oxytocin is a bonding hormone, right? Have you ever heard of Pitocin? You know any
Yes,
gals that
that's
have,
that isn't that what they do to like induce labor?
yes,
Okay,
yes, you're
okay. I've never
exactly
had
right.
kids, but I feel like I've heard friends talk about this.
Totally right. Yeah. So if you've been around babies, been around pregnant women, labor and delivery, you've probably heard Pitocin. Pitocin is the synthetic form of oxytocin. So it's
Okay.
laboratory engineered synthetic oxytocin that our body creates naturally,
Okay. And
right?
oxytocin, you said, is the bonding.
Right,
Okay.
exactly. That it's a bonding hormone, right? And so it's the pregnant woman's body in labor and delivery is flooded with oxytocin, and they intensify it even more with synthetic oxytocin, pitocin, if there's having difficulty with labor and delivery, right? And we really think that that warm, fuzzy feeling that you have when your child is born and comes out, you're like, oh, after all this pain that you've just been in and all of this struggle and the discomfort, instead of wanting to kill that thing when it comes popping out of you for all the pain that it just caused you, there's this euphoria of kind of warmth and connection and just, oh, I just want to snuggle and hold and engage. It's all that oxytocin that's in the blood, right? That feels that bonding and connecting between mother and child kind of in that moment, right? So oxytocin plays a huge role in established relationships, right? In the sexual relationship. So for men experience this massive oxytocin release in their bodies when they orgasm with their spouse, right? So when you connect closely with your husband, you guys enjoy connecting sexually with each other, he orgasms, and that in his body there's this flood of oxytocin that leaves him feeling very close to you and connected with you. And there's this emotional attachment that got wired into his body for him to experience a bonding moment kind of with you through that sexual connection. And women experience that as well, but the release in men's body is about 400% greater. It's like 4 times the release that women have in that same experience.
Yeah, well, and I was even thinking, I mean, it can often, a lot of times, like women aren't orgasming every time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another
Yeah.
side of it that's like, well, are you still having that same reaction as him if you don't orgasm,
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. Great question. Orgasm isn't the only thing that causes oxytocin release. In fact, things for a woman, non-sexual physical touch, eye contact, right? When you gaze longingly, your husband gaze longingly into your eyes and is talking to you, kissing, snuggling, and that creates all sorts of oxytocin release within your body.
What that is.
Yeah, in fact, when he's attentive and listening to you, you're sharing your heart, you're sharing your day, you're sharing things that are meaningful to you, and that there's oxytocin that releases in
That's
your
so
body.
beautiful.
Yeah. When he is doing an active service of some sort, around the house or whatnot.
Oh, when my husband does the dishes, let me tell you, there it is. The
You can
oxygen.
feel the oxytocin, right? You can feel that.
Yes.
And this is such a really, really important distinction and understanding between men and women is that men experience this huge oxytocin release at the end of the sexual experience together, right? Where they're orgasming with their spouse. For women, for them to get in the mood, that oxytocin injection, that oxytocin experience that happens from the relational connectedness and these other kinds of non-directly sexually or erotic kinds of interactions causes oxytocin in the body that then primes that sexual desire and the desire for more sexual intimate connection. That's normal for women's bodies, which is why this emotional connection piece, right, this article that we're talking about is such a key player in this. That for a woman to have that oxytocin experience that then kind of primes the body for wanting to connect sexually requires these kind of emotionally connective experiences for her by God's design, right? So it's interesting. Think about the mechanics here, right? That, if you back up and look at God's design within this, a man, has this bonding experience at the end of a sexual experience. Woman requires that emotional connectedness and that oxytocin experience at the beginning of the experience. And so for a man to be able to get to what his body is longing for at the end requires that he engage in a way that's outside of his normal structure and to serve his wife in ways that are not natural for him, but are what prime that experience for her. And so there's this kind of design that God has put into place here that says for you to get here, you've got to get out of yourself and engage in ways that are not natural for you in serving your spouse in order to cultivate that in your wife.
Oh, God is so sneaky and so smart.
Isn't that brilliant?
It is. It's brilliant. And it all goes back to, the marriage relationship being just kind of a prime example of our relationship with the Lord and all of those things, just the way that like you said, that the husband has to kind of get out of his bubble and serve his wife and love his wife, in order to get to that place. And not like it's like a, I'm only serving you so that I can get to this, but like a genuine desire to love his wife
Yeah.
and that kind of fulfilling the needs that both of them have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. So, sometimes husbands can be confused a little bit, right? Because they can be like, okay, I do that, or I have done that. I did that one time and it didn't work for me. As sometimes the conversation that I can have with is like, I tried that once, it didn't work. And that, and I'm like, okay,
One
okay.
time, one
One
time.
time, right? I tried that once, it didn't work. I just totally gave up on it after that, right? It's like, oh, okay. So let me say that one, we're talking about a setting a context kind of for this in our relationship, right? And it's not a guarantee that this is gonna like make everything magical and perfect. Think about it maybe like the gasoline in your car, right? There are other reasons why a car might not start, or other reasons why a car might break down other than running out of gas, right? And so it's not the only thing that can go wrong. It's not the only thing that could be getting in the way for you guys going. But without gas, car ain't gonna run, right? Like everything else can be great, no gas in the car, it ain't gonna run. And so you might start with going, is there fuel in the tank? Right? And start there. Because sometimes it's as simple as that. Sometimes the difficulties that a couple are having is there's just not gas in the tank. And it's not that there's something major broken under the hood. It's not that there's, some huge mechanical issue with the vehicle. It's just run out of gas and we got to put gas in the tank. And if we'll do that, maybe it won't start on the first time you go to turn over as the fuel's getting back up into the engine and up through the pump, gets primed. But that'll do the trick if we'll fill the tank up on it. If we fill the tank up and it's still not turning over, maybe there's something else. We got to troubleshoot it further. But man, it's a necessary starting place to see, are we filling the tank to begin with?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to just talk through as we, kind of continue this segment about this awesome article that you've written, just how to kind of fill that tank. You mentioned several tips throughout the article, ways that husbands can pour into their wives, ways to kind of troubleshoot those problems. You mentioned being friends and making out in the kitchen and some of these different things. And I'd love it if you could just expand on some of those tips.
No, I want you to expand on them.
You want me to
I
expand?
do. Here's the game we're going to play, right? So this is a modeling, right, of what it is I want husbands to do, engage. This is kind of the tip, right? I'm going to ask you, what are the things that feel like it puts that fuel in your tank, in your marriage, the experience that you have in that, and then I'm going to listen, right? I'm going to ask you a question about your experience of life and then listen and take that in. And this is kind of the starting place, if you're a husband out there and you're going, well, what are the tips? Give me the tips here. I'll make my bullet point list. You tell me what to do, I'll go to do it. You have this woman that you're in a relationship with, right? And she knows her own experience and what those things are for her. You don't so much need me to tell you of what it is that will put that fuel in your spouse's tank, as much as you need to ask the question of her. Create the space, be genuinely interested in what her experience of life is. Invite her to share with you what those things are that really put the fuel in the tank for her, and take those things in. Listen to that. So we're going to practice that in that, right? Tori, I would love to know from you, as you know your own experience, then, what are the things that are really good for you? What are the things that help put that fuel in your tank in your relationship?
Yeah, I think, and I mean, you touch on some of these ideas, but I think, when my husband is intentional about loving me, that just speaks volumes beyond him saying the right things or doing the right things. It's just the intentionality of, I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to do the dishes without you even asking me. And, sometimes I hear this joke. I've heard it a few times, this like chore play. And I think it's so funny. But honestly, sometimes, at least for me, in my own experience, it's very accurate, just in the sense of like, when my husband, is serving me intentionally and genuinely, I mean, that definitely increases those oxytocin levels for sure. And I think that is just really important. And I think beyond that, just like being a friend, really just listening and sitting with me and, asking me about my day, but with a genuine desire to know about my day and hear. And I think that all of those things all kind of work together to kind of create that emotional safety and emotional connection for me. I think for me personally, as a woman and in my relationship, safety is really key for me. To feel emotionally safe and seen by him changes the
What does
game.
that what does that mean? What does that look like? So for you, to feel safe emotionally and within a relationship, what are the kinds of things that your husband does that helps you feel emotionally safe with him?
Yeah, I'm getting blushy just thinking about him because I love him so much. But I think just when he really thinks of me, when he says, "I saw this today and it reminded me of you," I think feeling known is very important for me when it comes to feeling safe. And I touched on this earlier. The Hebrew word that God uses in Genesis to describe sex is yada, which means to be known. And I think that is just so key for me in feeling safe, is knowing that this man who wants to be with me in that way knows me beyond just my body. He knows me beyond what he's getting out of this. He knows my heart and my soul and the things that I'm passionate about, the things that excite me, the things that hurt me. And he's intentional about being mindful of all of that. I think is just really important. It's not hard. I just think like a
Oh,
lot
that's easy for you to say, Tori, and it's not hard. For men, it's actually, for most of us, some of it's more natural and easy. Some of us, again, grew up with dads that were great at this and modeled it, and so we internalized it, and it's first nature for us. But man, for a lot of us, the things that you're describing feel like a foreign country, like you're describing an alien world. It
yeah, I'm
feels
sorry to
like,
want to encourage the men watching this that like all she wants is to feel safe with you. you
yeah.
know she wants to feel known by you. She wants to feel loved by you. And
Mhm.
every woman is a little bit different. I mean, the things that make me feel
Totally.
loved might not make your wife feel loved, but
Right. Which is why this what we're doing right here is so important, right? Is you're not laying it out there necessarily for every woman that's out there, but what you're doing is you're modeling kind of what happens when you're able to be asked and listened to, right? That every woman's heart wants to be known, and she wants the things that are her and the things that make her her and the things that do it for her and drive that feeling of being loved and feeling close and accepted and feeling safe. Wants her husband to know those things about her. It's not unless she's been shut down a whole lot, right, and doesn't trust you, when you ask. And most women don't require a whole lot of like teeth pulling in order to share the things that are really meaningful to them. If they've been really hurt, and there's mistrust in the relationship because the things that have happened, breaches in the relationship, so they don't really believe you're genuine when you ask, and so then they might be real hesitant to be vulnerable in that way and share those things for fear that it might lead further hurt. But assuming you have, a level of safety within your relationship, if you ask, you're probably going to get a response, an honest response about how they experience life and what they really enjoy with you and what they would love more of with you and what really does it for them in terms of them feeling close and connected. And that safety piece, like you're talking about, that being known, part of that's about me really caring about, or your husband really caring about your experience of life.
Mm.
Right? That, that I treat those things, and he would treat those things as sacred and as precious, that he would want to hear that and not want to say or do things that would be hurtful to your heart, or uh, ignore, neglect, or blow those things off. That knowing that your heart matters to him, and that he wants to hold that in high honor and protect that. That's, you tell me, is that part of what makes it feel safe for you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just to feel treasured, I think is the word that I
Mm,
would use,
yeah,
just treasured.
that's a powerful word. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, just in closing about this emotional connection piece,
Mhm.
what would be your word of advice to the husband who's watching this and is wondering what to do?
Totally. Do what Tori and I just did. Only, not with Tori, with your wife in that, right? Go and invite an honest conversation around it,
Mm.
right? You know, just the mere fact, right? Let's go this way. We'll check it because we've got a woman here, and it's very helpful to have a woman in part of this dialogue conversation. You don't have to take my word for it as a man in this. Uh, you, Tori, your husband comes to you and says, "Hey, can we talk?" Then I really want to understand how you experience me, and what are the things that happen in our relationship that really help you feel close to me and connected with me and safe with me, and really are, encouraging to that for you. How do you feel about him asking that question?
I would probably respond with, I've been thinking about this lately.
Right? There's totally this piece of feeling valued and cherished and treasured just because he's wanting to have the conversation.
Totally. And as women, we have so many thoughts flowing in and out and little things that happen that make us think of something else. I mean, there's so many things that sometimes like it really is like, oh, I've thought about this recently and I kind of wanted you to ask me this.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so, just by initiating that conversation, kind of leading the way, and saying, "Hey, you matter to me. Our relationship matters to me. I want to understand this better. I want to be on the same page with you," and kind of creating that opportunity and that safety and that space for having the conversation is huge. Is huge. And it's not a one and done kind of conversation, but it's one of kind of earnestly having the heart of wanting to grow and knowing your wife, and to hear those things and to take those in and not try to change her, try to argue why those things shouldn't matter to her, or why those things don't matter then, but to accept her and what she's sharing with you, and to value those things. That'll be huge for every man out there. I mean, this is huge for me, and it's something that's struggle for me to do. Easy for me to kind of lose sight of that and have to need to circle back and make that space and go, how are you experiencing us? How is this for you with my wife? So that's what I would pitch out there, Tori.
Yeah, awesome. And I mean, I think even just to women, I think there's importance in you, initiating that conversation when you feel
Mm-hmm.
like you need to have it, and really
Mm-hmm.
sharing your heart and being vulnerable in that place. To love is to be vulnerable. It's to be real and raw.
Totally.
And when I'm struggling with something, when I'm feeling a certain way, it's huge to be able to go and communicate that to him, and really
Totally.
kind of be in it together, seeking that restoration, that emotional connection together.
Yeah, I totally want to encourage that and just affirm that, Tori. I think you're absolutely right, that there's a need for wise for you on your side of it to take responsibility for that in your relationship also, and to find your own voice and have your own voice in that, and to, rather than expecting him to just know that that conversation needs to happen, or that you're feeling a disconnect from him, for you to be able to own that and be able to bring that to him and go, "Hey, I really need to talk with you about this. I'm feeling disconnected from you." And rather than it being an attack, It's like, you're really sucking as a husband. We need to talk about this. Uh, Instead, for it to be like, hey, I really care about the connection between us, and I really want to be close with you, and I feel a disconnect, and I want to talk about what's happening for me that maybe is a part of that, and to really set it up for success in that way. So appreciate that, Tori.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, this has been great. I have loved talking about this article. Guys, if you're watching this and you heard some of what we have to say, there's a lot more unpacked in both this article and his whole series on better sex for women. So seriously recommend you go and give that a listen. In the description, we'll have that link in there for you to go listen to this. To go and read this. But it is just so helpful, such a game changer to be able to recognize this thing both in yourself and in your spouse.
Totally. Huge for couples.
Absolutely.